It's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and today I'm going to be showing you how to decorate sugar cookies. Now, my sister Candace and my daughter Ari have never really made sugar cookies on their own before, so I'm going to show you the common mistakes that beginner cookiers might make and how to fix them.
Let's get piping!
So, of course, in order to make a beautifully decorated sugar cookie, you have to start with a really good base. Working with my sister really showed me all of the mistakes that I used to make as well when I first started making sugar cookies. So one thing is you really need to make sure that you are flouring your surface and the surface of the cookie as well whenever you are rolling out your sugar cookies. It's really easy for things to start sticking, and of course when things start sticking, and especially if you're doing something like hand cutting like I am right here, it's going to be really frustrating if things stick after you've done all of that work. So having a generously floured surface is very important. The other thing that's really important is making sure that you're using a sharp knife to cut your cookie dough, and make sure you're using a sharp cookie cutter. I do own a few plastic cutters still, but I really prefer working with a metal cutter. One of the other things that I noticed too is that my sister, when she was rolling out her dough, she only rolled in one direction. It's really, really important to roll in both directions. That way you're gonna get a nice, even, and flat cookie. If your cookie is misshapen, it's a lot harder to actually decorate it afterwards. If your hand-cut cookies end up with a little jagged edge on the side, then you do want to make sure you kind of gently pat it down with your fingers, just so that when it bakes, it's nice and smooth. In this video, I'm actually using somebody else's sugar cookie recipe, which I will put down in the description box below. Royal icing consistency is where people mostly go wrong. So even when you have great piping technique, it'll never work if you don't have the proper icing consistency. Yeah, Candace doesn't bake much, so she really is trying her best. For every 1 cup of icing sugar, I am using 1 tablespoon of meringue powder. Then the trick here is to add your water in a little bit at a time. We are looking for flooding consistency, but we're looking for puffy flooding consistency. So this is a little bit trickier than just regular flooding consistency. What I mean by that is flooding consistency is usually used when you pipe a border, let that dry, and then flood. This is going to be used to pipe and also flood as well. I always use a whisk attachment to get that meringue nice and opaque. Sometimes you will notice though that if you whip too much, it'll never dry properly and it'll be too marshmallowy. Whenever you're dyeing the icing, make sure that you do it very sparingly. Chances are, if you're just learning to pipe cookies, then your piping isn't going to be super neat and tidy right off the bat. I know mine wasn't. But the trick is to fill in as puffily as you can. Make sure that you use enough icing, and then just use a cookie scribe or a toothpick to help yourself out and to fix any errors. One tip that I gave to my sister while doing this was not to pipe too close to the edge. It's better to pipe and give yourself a little bit more of a border. That way you can bring the icing out towards the edge. The other thing I wanted to point out was that my sister was piping her stuff fairly fast, so it is okay to slow down when you are piping. The trick is to stop squeezing the bag so much. When I first started decorating cookies, piping circles was really challenging. Now it's just super easy because I have a particular way of doing it. You squeeze the bag and you start at one point, and then you kind of keep a steady squeeze as you gently move your hand around in a circle and drop that line down. It's a little bit easier said than done. I learned this cookie trick way too late in my cooking career. So after that outer layer has turned opaque, and that usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes, then you can go ahead and pull your cookies out of the oven and they are ready to work on right away. Because the heat is so low, you're going to be just fine. Now, one thing is when you're looking at a cookie, you need to know which things to do in which order. Now, the reason that I did the bodice of the dress first and now I'm adding the skirt on is because I want that definition between the two pieces. I'm also going to add on her arms right now because I'm going to put on the puffy sleeves afterwards. If I put the puffy sleeves on first and then the arm, it's going to look like the arm is disconnected. And remember, anytime you're adding on more details to a detail that's already wet, you have to make sure that it is fully dry, unless you're doing the wet on wet technique, which with this cookie, we're not doing that. One thing you know I don't like to do is waste piping bags, so I also plan out which colors I'm going to do first. So this peachy color here, I know I'm not going to have to use it again, so I'm going to turn it into that yellow color that we're using for the hair. You'll also notice that I put a coupler into this piping bag. The reason for that is because I know I'm going to have to switch that tip later on to create the braid of her hair. My vision for this Mickey Mouse cookie is that we would create a Tangled themed Mickey Mouse. I love it when people do that. Add a ton of icing sugar, way more than you think you will need. Your icing will actually turn a little bit dry. In fact, the piping icing that I'm using here isn't even really thick enough to show the definition of the braid. Now, I was fine with it because I was fine with having a little bit of a looser looking braid and we were putting details on it anyway. But if I was being really picky and I wanted this to be super, super well defined, I would have thickened that icing up even further. You'll also notice that Candace is having a harder time trying to control it. It's a lot easier to control it when it's thicker. As a first-time cookier, it's so great to have things on hand like these edible gold pearls. That way it's going to brighten up anything you do. Piping is actually a series of shapes put together. And what I mean by that is when we are doing something like this flower, for example, notice how I am piping and then I'm just dragging it through, but I'm not continually piping. So it's really important that whenever you're doing polka dots or little details like this, you squeeze the bag, but stop squeezing once you've finished that detail. It's more like a squeeze, stop squeezing, and then swipe through to create those little rose petals. Oh, and also make sure if you're adding on any of those edible pearls, you do it when your icing is nice and wet still. Now, the detail piping consistency that I made earlier for the hair is actually a lot more perfect for something like this, where I'm doing lines. It's not overly dry and I can still attach pearls really easily. Whenever you're making something like 3D florals, it should be so dry that you can't really attach anything to it. Again, to avoid any peaks when you're making dots, you need to make sure that you squeeze and then you stop squeezing and lift up. In Rapunzel's dress, she actually has a little bit of a lighter purple variation on the sleeves, but since we're only making 2 cookies today, I don't feel like making a whole new piping bag. So we are using my favorite gold luster dust, which I pretty much use in like 90% of my cookie videos and cake videos. Adding on a little bit of this petal dust just to give her a nice blush. And finally, once everything is done, sometimes you can even go wrong here. So luckily, because I did put this in the oven for a little bit and I did it in layers over and over and over again, the face is fairly dry. But even so, you want to make sure that when you're using an edible pen, you are very, very gentle with it. It's Aria's turn, and she actually didn't get as much guidance as her Auntie Candace did, so we'll see how she does. This is the original picture that we were working off of. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that Instagram handle, so I will just put it all down in the description box below. Their cookies are amazing. Go and check them out. And I know that we didn't follow this to a T, but we did try as closely as possible. I think Candace did an amazing job. Honestly, baking isn't really her thing, but she really wanted to make this adorable little Rapunzel, and I think she nailed it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of this sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading daily, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to send me your baking fails, and it could be fixed by next Friday.